wildfire prevention, resources, and how to reduce wildfire risk. Today's 45-minute presentation will be divided into two segments. First, we welcome our guest speaker, Dave Jones, who is going to help enlighten us on how communities' actions can reduce overall insurance costs. We will have a few minutes of Q&A after Dave's presentation. Then we will hear from the Kirkwood Firewise Committee, and you're free to ask this hardworking group questions as well. You can post your questions anytime. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A icon. Don't use the chat one, use the Q&A one. You click the button and then type in your questions, and I will get to as many, hopefully all of them, as I can. So now let's get started. I'd like to introduce Dave Jones. Dave is a director of the Climate Risk Initiative at the UC Berkeley School of Law's Center on Law, Energy, and Environment. Before this, he was senior director for environmental risk at the Nature Conservancy, and he also served as California's insurance commissioner, where he regulated the largest insurance market in the United States. Dave founded and chaired the Sustainable Insurance Forum, an international network of insurance regulators developing climate risk regulatory best practices. He was the first U.S. financial regulator to require disclosure of investments in fossil fuel assets, and the first to conduct climate risk scenario analysis of insurers' investment portfolios. So we have a real heavy hitter here. Welcome, Dave, to our small and mighty community of Kirkwood, and I will let you take it away.
Great. Well, thank you for that very kind introduction, and it's a treat to get to spend some time with you. And Kirkwood has a very special place in my heart because my family and I, for decades, have spent considerable amount of time in Hope Valley, and we're cross-country skiing enthusiasts, and so we like to go to Kirkwood cross-country skiing resort every winter when there's snow. So as was mentioned, I had the privilege of leading the California Department of Insurance as the insurance commissioner for 8 years, and then worked with the Nature Conservancy, and now I'm at UC Berkeley School of Law. And what I'm going to share with you is some work that I led when I was at the Nature Conservancy, which is continuing, which explored the extent to which it might be possible to demonstrate that landscape scale forest management using prescribed fire and thinning would not only reduce the severity of wildfires, but also could be accounted for in insurance modeling and pricing. So that's a super long sentence with a lot of complexity. But what I'm going to do is share some slides and sort of walk you through the study that we undertook. I put into the chat the links to the two papers that we published. One I'm going to present on particularly today, which is around looking at how managing forests better from an ecological standpoint using prescribed fire and thinning can reduce wildfire risk and be accounted for in insurance pricing. And the second paper is a second project that we did focused on Paradise, which, as you know, sadly was consumed by a horrible, horrible wildfire. And we looked specifically at the utility of managed open space buffers around Paradise and how that would reduce fire risk and might manifest in lower insurance pricing as well. So you have a link to those two papers. I'm going to present on the first one, but I'm happy to talk a little bit about the second one too. So I'm going to try to share my screen, which is always fraught with peril, but let's see if I can make that work. So can folks see that? Okay, I see a nodding head, so I'm going to go from the beginning. Right there. All righty. So as I said, what I'm going to be presenting is some work that the Nature Conservancy did in partnership with Willis Towers Watson, which is a global reinsurer and insurance broker that has tremendous expertise in wildfire risk modeling. But this particular set of outcomes in this study is not limited just to Willis Towers Watson. It's actually replicable across the entire insurance sector. And so let me begin. So as probably you know better than most because you live in the forest, we've had a history in this country of fire suppression over the last 2 centuries, basically, since the onset of Western settlement, where the way we've managed forests is by suppressing fire. However, historically, going back before Western settlement of the Sierras, fire occurred naturally, or it was ignited by indigenous peoples, and it was used as a way to manage the forest. And fire actually had great ecological benefits in that it would reduce lower level vegetation and smaller trees, and allow for forests that are like the ones on the right that are characterized by more open space and older trees and more fire resistant trees, as opposed to the forest on the left, which is a forest that reflects fire suppression, where the forest itself becomes overgrown with a lot of vegetation, both at the ground level, but also smaller trees, which then become fuel for the major conflagrations that we've seen over the last decade or so. So one approach to managing forests is to mimic what nature does and to use prescribed fire, or what's known as controlled burns, and thinning to replicate the way that nature used to manage forests, so that we have healthier forests like those shown on the right, as opposed to the on the left. And the beauty of this is that not only is it healthier for the forest and better for the environment, but this approach also dramatically reduces the risk of severe wildfires, because the fires then, when they do occur, tend to stay on the ground, not get into the crowns of trees, not become superheated, and not become the kind of wildfires that we've seen over and over again. So this is an example of that. On the left, an example of a forest that has not been ecologically managed. On the right, an example of a forest that has been ecologically managed, where the forest stays on the ground, as opposed to on the left, where it gets up into the crowns of the trees, becomes very, very severe, and then drives itself forward as well. And so one of the benefits of this ecological approach, which the Nature Conservancy has had decades of experience with, is that it does reduce the risk of wildfire, in addition to making for healthier forests. So the Nature Conservancy has, as I said a moment ago, and others as well, quite a bit of experience with projects in national forests, in U.S. forest lands, where ecological forestry is being undertaken. And one in particular is occurring in Placer County. And it's a partnership with the Placer County Water Agency. And it involves treating 28,000 acres in the Tahoe National Forest, which is within the jurisdiction of the Placer County Water Agency, around a reservoir called French Meadows. And these two maps, if you will, depict the area in which the forest treatment is occurring. So the bounded area, where you've got sort of the boundary of kind of whitish gray, is the boundary of the area where the forest treatment is occurring, where across this 20,000 acres prescribed fire and thinning is being used. And I want to note here, a lot of the Nature Conservancy's science and practice demonstrates that you don't have to actually treat all 28,000 acres. You can treat 1/3 of the acreage and get the benefit across all the acreage. So in this case, we treated about 1/3 of 28,000 acres, but the benefit of the treatment inures to 20,000 acres. That grayish blob on the lower left, that's the reservoir. That's the French Meadows Reservoir. And what this depicts is it's a pictorial display of flame lengths with and without forest treatment. So the picture on the left, where you see all of that intense red, that is flame length without treating that acreage. And the darker red and the slightly less dark red are flame lengths of 30 or 40 feet in length and greater. And the slide on the right depicts what happens when you treat that area, and it dramatically reduces flame length to, on average, about 3 to 4 feet in length, which has a major benefit then in terms of reducing the severity of wildfire, keeping the wildfire out of the crowns of trees, and avoiding the sorts of huge catastrophic wildfires that we have been seeing. So in this particular project, the Conservancy not only is doing the work on the ground, but did fire behavior modeling that looked at the severity of wildfire with treatment and without treatment, and came up with a dramatic decrease in severity of wildfire associated with treatment for this project. So we took that project on the ground in Placer County and the fire behavior modeling associated with it, and partnered with Willis Towers Watson, which is a global insurance risk advisory firm and brokerage, and said to them, look, we have something we know works in terms of reducing wildfire risk. Can you take that into insurance modeling and see if it will actually reduce risk in insurance modeling and potentially result in lower insurance pricing as a result of the reduced risk of ecological forest management? And no one else had done this before. This was a first of its kind effort to see whether you could take the fire behavior modeling associated with ecological forest management on the ground and move it into insurance modeling and see what the results were. So that was the project, the Wildfire Resilience Insurance Project. The idea was to do the insurance modeling, taking into account this nature-based approach. It was to see whether there might be insurance savings associated with this nature-based approach. And we looked at two particular kinds of insurance. We looked at indemnity insurance, which is a traditional kind of insurance that you're, I'm sure, very familiar with, where homes or businesses, business properties are insured, and the insurance pays out based on the nature of the loss and the proof of loss. But there's another kind of insurance called parametric insurance, which is a new product that's entering the market, where it pays out based on an objective trigger being reached. And that objective trigger in this case could be a wildfire of a certain intensity or wildfire of a certain scope. So as the insured, say, homeowner or business owner or property owner, you don't have to prove that you suffered a particular damage in order for the insurance payout. The insurance actually pays out if the wildfire gets to a certain level of intensity. And it is a lot easier, of course, from the standpoint of the policyholder, because that trigger is objective and it pays out. You don't have to go through the claims process, et cetera, et cetera. But it also turns out parametric insurance is another great way to see whether landscape scale management of forests actually results in insurance benefits. So we looked at those two kinds of insurance. So the big blue blob there is the entire jurisdiction of the Placer County Water Agency. The purple lines are the county lines. So that's actually Placer County. So the water agency's jurisdiction is within Placer County. That sort of little odd-shaped green bounded area in the right, well, that's where the French Meadows project is and was. So what we did was we looked at what sort of benefits one might get if ecological forestry was applied across 1/3 of the entire Placer County Water Agency jurisdiction. And we looked at the severity of wildfire without ecological forestry. And that's the picture on the left, which pictorially shows in the darker blue areas that are at high risk of a severe wildfire without ecological forestry. And then on the right is depicted what that same geographic area looks like if you apply ecological forestry across 1/3 of the Placer County Water Agency's jurisdiction. So pictorially, there's a great reduction in both potential for severe wildfire as well as the severity of the wildfire. So let's get to the bottom line, the results, right? So one of the results was, for the first time ever, we were able to account for ecological forest management at scale and insurance modeling. No one had done that before. And we were able to demonstrate across different kinds of insurance for different sorts of policyholders that there was a reduction in losses and savings in insurance premium. So, for example, we looked at 81,000 homes within about a half mile of or in the Placer County Water Agency's area. And those 80,000 homes aren't clustered in one community, they're spread out. But all 81,000 of those homes would benefit from doing ecological forest management across 1/3 of the Placer County Water Agency's jurisdiction. And so we were able to calculate what the insurance premium savings would be for those homes if ecological forestry were applied, and all other things being equal. That savings is $21 million a year. So that is one of several indicators. We also looked at insurance products for the water agency for various use cases that the water agency might have for using insurance, and for others. And across each of them, we found significant savings in insurance associated with managing the forest better from an ecological standpoint. So this just is a little additional bit of information about those benefits. And so the top line in this particular spreadsheet is the entire watershed. And that shows that the premium being collected by those 81,000 homes is about $51 million a year, but there was a 41% reduction with the application of ecological forestry. Then we looked at a very small community that just had 533 housing homes called Forest Hill, and there we saw benefits as well. So we looked at it across the whole area, but we also looked at it more narrowly at a particular community and saw that the benefits attain both across the whole area as well as in a localized way. So one thing that we considered in our paper, and all this is laid out in exhaustive detail in the paper that is at the link that I put in the chat, is how one might capture those premium savings associated with insurance, where there's a premium savings due to ecological forest management, and whether you could capture those premium savings and put them into helping to fund or finance more ecological forest management. That's sort of the virtuous circle. And we were able to demonstrate that across different kinds of insurance, there might be mechanisms to capture the premium savings. And certainly the savings, well, we're not asserting that the savings are sufficient to cover all of the costs of ecological forestry. They can contribute significantly to the cost of ecological forestry and making that investment in the forest. So it's an additional economic benefit associated with forest management that is potential insurance savings, which if you can capture them, can help go to fund and finance the underlying ecological forest management that you're doing in the forest to try to make things safer and reduce insurance pricing. So one way, I know this is like a really challenging eye chart here, but one way in which those premium savings might be captured is a new product which insurers are beginning to think about offering called community-based catastrophe insurance. So you're all too well aware that as individual homeowners, you're finding it increasingly impossible to find insurance. You've been non-renewed, maybe even forced to go to the surplus lines market. So insurers are beginning to think about, as they're contending with higher wildfire risk in the wildland-urban interface, offering a group product, kind of like group health insurance. If you think about an employer who buys group health insurance for employees, this would be sort of a group home wildfire insurance product for a group of homes. And it could be sold to an HOA, or it could be sold to a community services district, or it could be sold to a municipality. And that insurance would be purchased for the homes in that jurisdiction. And that can be a very useful way to capture the premium savings. Why? Because if you're doing ecological forestry around the group of homes for which the insurance is being purchased, then you'll see a reduction in the price of that insurance. And that reduction, you could flow all of that reduction directly to those homeowners, and they could collect that benefit entirely. Or you could take a little portion of that reduction in price and capture it and use it to pay for the underlying cost of the ecological forestry, or at least contribute to paying for the cost of ecological forestry. So what this just shows is that basically premiums will be paid by homeowners to a city or town or other jurisdiction like an HOA. That entity buys the insurance. Insurance pays the claims out to the homeowners. That's the concept of community-based catastrophe insurance. But because it's a group policy, it's better able to capture the group benefits, if you will, of ecological forestry and other potential landscape scale interventions. So just very quickly, so I won't leave time for questions, but with regard to parametric insurance, that's that new kind of insurance I mentioned a moment ago where you don't have to prove a loss. It just pays out based on the trigger of an event. We looked at 3 different use cases for a parametric insurance product where we were accounting for the benefit of ecological forestry and its pricing. One was, for the Placer County Water Agency to use that insurance to cover timber and debris removal after a wildfire. That's a big cost for them. When there's a big fire like the King Fire, they end up spending millions of dollars pulling debris and sediment out of their various reservoirs, dams, dam forebays. Another is sediment removal. That's another use case for this parametric insurance product. The third is we looked at a hypothetical timber company and the value it would lose if there were a wildfire in timber, and how a parametric insurance product might help insure that as well. And across all 3 of these use cases, we found that with ecological forestry, the price of that parametric insurance product was considerably lower in price. So this is just a little sum up of some of that. I mean, we found that the losses were reduced by 41 to 62%, which resulted in a commensurate reduction in premium. This is across the different parametric products. Now, because you're talking about one insured, you know, the absolute premium savings, 39,000, 360,000 are low, but the idea would be that a number of commercial property owners would take this up and those savings would be aggregated. And then you could use those savings or some portion of them to help pay for treatment. And we did a little analysis that indicated, you know, how much treatment you could finance or what percentage of the treatment you could finance over time based on the savings. All that's in the paper. Okay, so what are we doing next? So now that we've proven for the first time that better managing forests can result in reducing insured losses and potentially in reduction in insurance premiums, the Nature Conservancy is doing a couple things. One is we're encouraging insurance modelers to take up these results so that to the extent that landscape scale ecological forest management is occurring in their homes near it, that direct writers of insurance would account for that in their insurance underwriting and pricing and making it available. And so to reinsurers, we want them to begin to take that up as well. So we've done some presentations to various insurance trade associations. There's been interest. So far, you know, none of them have committed to taking it up, but they certainly are convinced that our results bear out and are worthy of consideration. And I think, you know, we're going to continue to urge them to take this up, as I know others are as well. The second is, this is yet another benefit of more federal, state, and local investment in forest treatment. I mean, not only does it reduce wildfire risk, that treatment, but it also has an economic benefit in terms of insurance. And so we're using these results to advocate at the national level, as well as the state and local level, for more investment in forest treatment. And you probably saw last year, the legislature and governor made a major appropriation for forest treatment, as did in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. There's about $6 billion nationally for national lands, wildfire treatment as well. And third, we're trying to actually pilot this product. And for the first time, actually have a customer buy an insurance product that reflects the fact that there is forest management occurring around whatever it is that's being insured and has a lower price accordingly. And so we're in conversations with Vail Resorts, for example, about the possibility of you know, they're pulling out some of their assets where there's forest management occurring around them and separately insuring them and seeing if we can demonstrate that that insurance will be lower price because of that forest management. And we're talking to some community service districts in the Sierra Nevadas that are interested in potentially being a customer for this as well. So I'll stop there. I'll unshare this, and I'm happy to take questions. That was sort of a quick march. And again, the last thing I would just say too is that there's a separate but related project that we did with Paradise, where we were looking at the acquisition of or stewardship agreements with private and public landowners adjacent to Paradise, where you could create an open space managed buffer around Paradise, or at least the portions of Paradise that are most threatened by severe wildfire. And in that second paper, which I've added a link to, we were able to demonstrate that these wildfire risk reduction buffers will reduce the risk of wildfire and also can be accounted for in insurance modeling too. So some very, very promising results. Now we actually have to just see if we can apply it in actual insurance provision. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions folks might have.
Thank you so much. That's really very promising, as you were saying, news and a lot of work. Here's the first question is, can HOA members as a group also be considered as customers to such an insurance?
Yes, theoretically. So this community-based wildfire, community-based catastrophe insurance would do exactly that. And so one possible path would be that the HOA buys insurance for the homes within some portion of the HOA, some or all, and then the coverage itself is for the individual homes, right? And some premium is collected from the individual homeowners on some pro rata or risk-based way that then is collected by the HOA and then used to pay the premium to the insurer. So that's the concept. It hasn't been done yet, but that's what we're exploring with our partner Willis Towers Watson, is whether where there's an HOA, where there's forest management occurring at scale, might there be an opportunity for the HOA to be the purchaser? The other route that we're exploring is a municipal entity, right? Like a community services district, of which there are many in the Sierra Nevadas. So North Star, for example, the North Star Community Services District actually has taken it upon itself to do forest management in its service area, where there are 2 large HOAs, by the way, as well as a Vail Resorts property. And they have been doing this for some number of years now, the Community Services District. And they just recently went to their property owners and got approval for a modest fee to fund more of this work. And so, that's a potential place where if that community services district wanted to be the purchaser of the insurance and insure some portion of homes within its district, we could look at what that insurance price might be, given that there's forest management that's been occurring in and around that area. So that's kind of an example of what a pilot might look like.
Thank you. Here's another question. Would insurance for non-wildfire related losses be a separate policy?
Good question. Maybe. I mean, we've thought about this principally as a wildfire cover, but it could be a broader cover. It really just depends on what we're able to get the underwriters to do. Mm-hmm. And from a pilot standpoint, either or both are perfectly good. We're sort of agnostic. The underwriters, because they might be more interested in seeing how the wildfire piece works, might just want to write the wildfire portion. But it could be both. And we're open to both at this point.
And another question, once a forest is burned, when should ecological forest management begin? And theoretically, oops, sorry, I got a pop up in the way. And theoretically, with so much forest burn, has risk been reduced that might be reflected in insurance premiums?
Great question. So on the first question, so the return rate, if you will, on ecological forestry, most of the Nature Conservancy science and studies indicate that when you treat a forest with prescribed fire and thinning, that you probably have to go back in and reapply at some level, not completely, say between, 5 to 8 years from first application. And you get about a 10-year benefit before you need to renew again. So that's sort of the duration of the effect. And the question with regard to all of the areas that have burned so far. So yes, insurance catastrophe modelers are taking that into account to some extent, but maybe not as much as they should be. And that's one of the things we're trying to surmount here, is that by and large, insurance modelers are not accounting in their modeling of risk and loss and pricing. They're not accounting for landscape scale forest management. So the purpose of this project by the Nature Conservancy was to try to prove that you could account for it in insurance modeling, and then persuade insurers to begin accounting for it. And so to some extent, they are accounting for areas that have burned already, because the data sets that they rely upon to do their modeling take into account where burns have occurred. And so that is factored in to some extent. But my observation is that they're not fully accounting for that, and they're certainly not accounting for human-directed forest management, either ecological forestry or thinning or prescribed fire. That's not being accounted for at all currently. And that's one of our objectives, is to get them to start doing it.
Who would need to be approached if a Kirkwood HOA wanted to act as a test case?
Well, that's a great question. So I could certainly put you in touch with the lead at the Nature Conservancy. I want to calibrate expectations a little bit, though, because there is a lot of interest in this idea, as you could imagine. And the Conservancy is a little bit resource constrained right now. And we probably have a near term pilot potential with North Star, because they've actually done a lot of forest management within their community services district. So I just want to kind of calibrate expectations, but I'd be happy to put you in touch with the Conservancy point of contact. Her name is Sarah Hurd. So I will, I'll send to the person that emailed me that Sarah's contact information, but I think and I'm not in I say we, I'm not at the Conservancy anymore. I'm doing some advising for them, but I think there have been some, there are some resource constraints there that I just want to alert you to. So the first task is to find some place somewhere where forest management has occurred at scale, where we have a customer, we can place this insurance, and then go more broadly after that.
Thank you. Another question. In the meantime, are there specific insurance companies you would recommend that homeowners at Kirkwood can contact to obtain insurance coverage for our homes? AIG is not renewing our home at Kirkwood.
Yeah, well, I know that's a big problem, not only at Kirkwood, but throughout the wildland urban interface. And so what's happening is that over the last 5 years or so, insurers have suffered very significant losses, and they are profit maximizing organizations, and they have, many of them, concluded that the risk is too high of severe wildfire, and the risk of loss and the magnitude of loss is too great, and so they are starting to non-renew policies. And I'm sure each and every one of you have experienced that in some way, shape, or form. So my successor sponsored a bill which I supported when I was insurance commissioner. He was in the state Senate at that point, which gives the commissioner the authority to issue a 1-year moratorium in the wake of a declared wildfire disaster, a 1-year moratorium on renewals. And so he has done that 3 years now in the wake of the various wildfires. And that's given people a little bit of relief for a year. But at the expiration of that year, if, gosh forbid, there isn't another wildfire in that particular area, that moratorium elapses, and then they can non-renew. When I was commissioner, I sponsored legislation that would have required insurers to renew insurance where homeowners met some standard of home hardening, and that standard would have to be defined by some expert empirical body. But the idea, the concept of the bill was, if a homeowner hardened their home, doing all the things that the fire experts tell you to do, and there was a community-wide mitigation effort, like ecological forestry or some other community-wide mitigation effort, and there'd be some standard for that too. If both those were met, then the bill said the insurers would have to write the insurance. The insurers weren't happy with that. They were successful in defeating that bill. I tried it twice. They were successful in defeating it twice. And so, unfortunately, at least currently, there doesn't look to be a path to require insurers to write insurance where homeowners are doing the very things that fire officials tell them to do, and there's landscape scale mitigation going on. So the path is one of demonstrating to them that this can be accounted for in modeling, that it's in their interest, that this will allow them to continue to write insurance in areas where there has been high wildfire risk, because where forest management is occurring, that risk will be lower. So that's the path that the Conservancy is pursuing currently, to try to accomplish that. So the wildfire insurance of last resort, as you all too well know, is the FAIR plan. The FAIR plan is priced based on the risk, and that's why it's super expensive. There's no subsidy that goes into it. And so that is available, but I recognize it's very, very expensive, and only covers a limited portion of the risk. And then you got to go out and buy an umbrella policy to cover the rest of your risk. So it's a huge hassle and challenge for people. I recognize that. But the hope of the Conservancy is that, if we can pilot this insurance that takes into account the benefits of landscape scale investments in forest management, and get the feds and the state to put more money into that we can convince the insurers to come back into these markets and begin to renew and write insurance again. Because the requiring them to do it path just has not been politically viable given their influence in the legislature.
Thank you so much, Dave. This sort of dovetails a little bit when you're talking about insurance and what the homeowner can do into the Kirkwood Firewise Committee, which has just been starting with quite a roar, especially since the Caldor fire. And Beth McAllister is going to take a few minutes to describe what's happening with that. And I'm sure there might be some questions after that. And I don't know what your timing is, Dave, if you're able to stick around in case
I'm happy to hang out.
Oh,
Happy to
great.
hang out. Yeah.
Oh, yay. Great. So whoops, did I lose you guys? Something.
I just shared my screen.
Oh, great. Okay.
I did want to show this list to answer the question about, this is from the California Insurance Commission, and it does show the insurance companies that are giving discounts for fire hardened homes and communities. So you can see Firewise Community here. So the prominent ones are State Farm, and I think Heidi Welsh had sent a message that she was able to go to USAA Group to get that insurance. So I just wanted to bring that up before, in case we lose people before my presentation.
Yeah, well, take it away, Beth. I'll let you introduce everything so you can have more time without me talking.
Okay, great. So let me just put it into show mode here. Okay, so we mentioned Firewise, but what is Firewise? In case people weren't on the November seminar, I'll just briefly go through it. So Firewise is a program. It's sponsored by the National Fire Protection Association. And the goal is to engage residents to help mitigate wildfire risks. It's really a framework to educate residents so that they can take informed, proactive action to harden their home, improve their defensible space, and work as a community to make the entire community safer.
Beth,
So there's
interrupt you because we're not seeing your slides. We're still looking at the insurance chart that you have.
That's interesting. Let's see.
Oh, technology.
I might want to close that then.
Now we get to see you. Yay.
Okay, so let's see. I'm sorry about that. Can you see it now?
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, let me just go into show mode. Thank you for telling me that. So yes, there's a committee in Kirkwood, and we've come together to get recognition for Kirkwood as a Firewise USA community. And the benefits are obviously increasing awareness of fire safety, helping to secure and reduce homeowner insurance premiums. I did just show that. And also it enables us as a group to apply for grant money that we wouldn't be able to apply for as individuals. And there are several agencies, including like State Farm partners with the Fire Safe Councils, for grants, to provide grants to help fund defensible space projects. We've had overwhelming support from the community. And so right now, the Kirkwood Firewise USA community consists of 18 of our homeowners associations, and that's 574 residences, KMPUD, Vail Resorts, and the KCA. So we're really pleased with the participation that we're getting. So what's required to become a Firewise community is the first thing we do is we submit an application. And there are two parts. There's a community risk assessment. And from that assessment, there comes recommendations, and then you develop a 3-year action plan. And that 3-year action plan is what our volunteers in the community will apply their hours to based on what that action plan says. So we've made so much progress to date. Our final drafts were prepared with input from our own fire department, KBFD. And then from that, we've actually just completed the external review. So we have a local battalion chief from CAL FIRE has reviewed our documents, as well as both county fire safe councils. We just had a very productive meeting with the ranger from the El Dorado National Forest, the Amador Ranger District today, to get their cooperation with our goals. And so we are on track to submit our application to the NFPA by March 1st. And we expect to get approval by May of 2022, hopefully sooner than that, but we at least need to go ahead so that we can start rolling out things in the summer. So our next steps are to continue to develop our website. We're very fortunate we had a local resident from KMA. His name is Jim Ambrose, and he set up that website for us. So it's www.kirkwoodfirewise.org. And eventually that's going to be our single source for education and training materials, best practices, and really be a repository of all of the external links. It will also be where the volunteers will sign up for community work days, and it's going to be the way that we'll record our community volunteer hours. So to maintain our recognition as a Firewise community, we'll have to put in those 574 hours or equivalent dollars on an annual basis. So it goes by 1 hour per residence. And so we're going to have to show that we've done that. We'll be working on education and awareness materials. So we plan to use the HOA meetings that typically occur in July to roll those out through our HOA liaisons. And we'll also be rolling things out at the Kirkwood Summer Festival in July. And it's really educating everyone on how fires start, how to harden your home and create defensible space. And we are working on coming up with the evacuation cards that we would want to put in every single residence. We'll be organizing community and neighborhood work days, working with our stakeholders, KMPUD, Vail, and KCA, as well as working with the HOA liaisons to identify projects within the common areas and along the roads. And most importantly, or just as important, is we'll be putting some time into applying for grants from the Amador Fire Safe Council, NFPA, PG&E as well. And so we've identified at least 3 grant opportunities, and those can help fund defensible space projects like in the common areas within the resort. So what can everyone do in the meantime? Please, if you have ideas, feedback, questions, you can email us at kirkwoodfirewise@gmail.com. And also, if anyone in the community is an expert at writing grants or would like to, join the team to do that, we would very much welcome that skill set. And you could also get a head start on the education. There's so much information out there, and we've put the links to the NFPA material, CAL FIRE, as well as the Fire Safe Council information on our website. So thank you in advance for getting involved. And we're really, really excited for the summer to be able to get going and roll out our program. That was all I
Thank you so
had.
much. Thank you so much. We've got a question here. Do you provide home or site inspections to provide specific fire hardening recommendations to homeowners at Kirkwood?
So as the committee itself, you know, we're not trained to do those inspections. So what we're going to have in the beginning is being able to educate the community so that it's, you know, kind of simple to understand and be able to take the action yourself. And we'll have to look at how we can get these defensible space inspections. We really like to call them advisory visits. And so we need to figure out how we're going to get the resources to do that. And, you know, we've approached the KMPUD board to see, is there a way that that can be funded? Because right now our fire department does not have the resources to do these advisory visits. So that is something that we do need to identify how to get the resources to do that.
Thank you. Dave, there's one question for you that's come in. What's the first thing that you'd recommend a Kirkwood homeowner do regarding their insurance?
Well, I think it's really exciting that you're putting together a Firewise USA effort. And I think that is very helpful, both in terms of reducing the risk for homes in Kirkwood HOA, but also potentially, as was pointed out, potentially helping obtain a discount for those carriers that are willing to do that. The challenge is that while they are willing to offer a discount in some circumstances connected with homes being a part of a Firewise community or otherwise doing home hardening or mitigation, they don't have to write the insurance in the first instance. So it is, I thought that was really great that Beth shared the list of those companies that at least officially are offering discounts, but the offer of a discount or their inclusion in that list doesn't necessarily mean they're willing to write insurance for your specific home if they conclude the risk is too high, even if you're in a Firewise community. Having said that, better to be in one than not. Greater likelihood that they will write, greater likelihood that you might get some reflection in pricing. So it's a very positive thing. So I guess specifically, I mean, do the things that the fire officials are telling you to do to make your home, to reduce risk. And that includes all the things that are associated with the Firewise community effort. And unfortunately, then, you know, depending upon the appetite of insurers in your area, you're just going to have to shop around. I thought it was great to note that USAA is still insuring. That's fantastic. I mean, that's really great news. But there are many areas in the wildland urban interface where people are just being forced to go to the FAIR plan. Even if they've done everything that the fire officials have told them to do to harden their home, the background risk is just so great still that the insurer is deciding we're not going to write it. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Beth, I think this question is for you. Amador and Alpine counties have trained people who do the advisory visits. Why can't we ask them to help us?
Yes, so we have contacted Amador County, the fire protection district there. So I think it's just a matter of us working through working out those resources, say with KVFD, because it's really not their jurisdiction. So typically those visits are done by the fire protection district. So I think that's just something we have to work through with KVFD and those districts.
Well, I think we've answered the community's questions and have learned so much. Dave and Beth, thank you both so much for all the work that you've done and for sharing that with us. And fingers crossed, we're going to have a really wet season somehow. And we'll do our job to be prepared for if there ever is another Caldor fire kind of experience. But anyway, thank you both so much for being here, and thanks the community for all your questions. And we will see you at the next fire safety seminar, which will be in the spring. So thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
you.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.